The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of Bellini's, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of downtown Chicago. The warm glow of chandeliers reflected off polished silverware as the dinner crowd began to fill the tables. In the corner of the restaurant stood a beautiful grand piano, its sleek black surface occasionally catching the light. It was mostly for show these days, though sometimes on special nights. The restaurant would hire a musician to play soft melodies as guests enjoyed their meals. Among the busy waitstaff moved a young woman with tired eyes but a kind smile. Lily had been working double shifts at Bellini's for 3 months straight, her feet aching by the end of each night. At 28, she carried the weight of responsibilities that most people her age couldn't imagine. Between caring for her younger brother after their parents' accident and struggling to pay off student loans from her unfinished music degree, Lily had little time for herself anymore. "Table 12 needs more bread," called out Miguel, the head waiter, as he passed Lily with a tray of cocktails. Lily nodded, quickly filling a basket with warm rolls before making her way through the maze of tables. As she passed the piano, her eyes lingered on it for just a moment. A small flicker of something, perhaps longing or remembrance, crossing her face. It was a brief pause in her otherwise constant motion, but it happened every time she walked by the instrument, a tiny ritual that somehow kept a part of her past alive. "Excuse me," called a customer, pulling Lily back to the present. "Could we get some fresh pepper?" With a quick nod and smile, Lily returned to her duties. Tonight was particularly busy, and she couldn't afford to get lost in daydreams about what might have been. She needed this job, needed the tips, and that meant staying focused. Around 8 o'clock, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. The maitre d' was greeting someone with unusual enthusiasm, and several staff members straightened their postures as the group was led to the best table in the house, right in Lily's section. "That's Robert Chen," whispered Miguel as he passed Lily at the service station, "the tech guy who made billions with that new software everyone uses. He's known to leave $1,000 tips if he likes the service." Lily's heartbeat quickened. A $1,000 tip would cover her brother's medical checkup next week, with enough left over to perhaps fix the leaky roof in their small apartment. She smoothed down her black apron and took a deep breath before approaching the table. The group consisted of 5 people, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Lily's monthly rent. At the center sat Robert Chen, a man in his early 40s with kind eyes that contrasted with his powerful presence. Unlike the others, who were talking loudly about stock options and investment opportunities, Chen seemed quieter, more observant. "Good evening," Lily greeted them with her practiced, professional smile. "Welcome to Bellini's. My name is Lily, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you off with some drinks?" As she took their orders, expensive wines and top-shelf whiskeys, Lily noticed Chen watching her with a curious expression. It made her slightly uncomfortable, but not in a threatening way. It was more like he was trying to figure something out. The evening progressed smoothly. Lily brought their appetizers, then main courses, making sure everything was perfect. Each time she approached their table, she felt Chen's eyes on her, though he was always polite when speaking to her. His companions barely acknowledged her presence beyond stating their orders, but he thanked her each time, making brief but genuine eye contact. During a moment when she was refreshing their water glasses, the restaurant's background music changed to a classical piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. Lily's hand slowed almost imperceptibly as the familiar notes filled the air, and for just a second her fingers twitched at her side, unconsciously finding phantom piano keys. "You know this piece," Chen said. It wasn't a question. Startled, Lily looked up to find him watching her with interest. "Yes," she admitted, not seeing any reason to lie. "It's beautiful. Do you play?" he asked, gesturing toward the untouched piano across the room. The question caught Lily off guard. Most customers didn't ask her personal questions, and those who did were usually just making small talk or, worse, flirting inappropriately. But Chen's inquiry seemed genuinely interested. "I used to," she replied, her voice softening despite herself. "A long time ago." One of the women at the table laughed loudly at something another person said, drawing Chen's attention away. Lily took the opportunity to retreat to the kitchen, feeling strangely exposed, as if Chen had somehow seen through her carefully constructed waitress persona to the person underneath, the one who once had different dreams. As the night went on, Lily found herself becoming more aware of the piano's presence in the room. Each time the classical playlist cycled to a new piece, memories flickered through her mind. Hours spent practicing in the university music rooms, the weight of her professors' expectations, the scholarship that had offered her a chance at a different life, and the family emergency that had forced her to give it all up. While clearing the dessert plates from Chen's table, Lily overheard snippets of their conversation about a charity gala for young musicians. Chen was apparently a major donor to arts education programs across the city. "The talent these kids have is incredible," he was saying, "but so many of them never get the chance to develop it because of financial barriers or lack of support." His words hit close to home, and Lily felt a familiar ache in her chest. That could have been her story too if things had been different. If her parents hadn't died, if her brother hadn't needed her, if life had been just a little kinder. As the evening wound down and the restaurant began to empty, Chen's group remained, now sipping coffees and digestives. Lily was clearing a nearby table when she noticed Chen had separated from his group and was standing by the piano, running his fingers lightly over its closed lid. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. For a moment, Lily felt as if they were the only two people in the restaurant, connected by the silent presence of the instrument between them. Chen beckoned her over with a small gesture. Hesitantly, Lily approached, aware that Miguel was watching from across the room with a curious expression. "How long did you play?" Chen asked when she reached him. 15 years, Lily replied, surprised by her own honesty. "I was studying piano performance at Northwestern before I had to drop out." Chen nodded, as if confirming something he had already guessed. "Family emergency? How did you—" "Just a feeling," he said with a gentle smile. "The way you look at this piano, it's not with regret of someone who chose to quit. It's with the longing of someone who had to give up something they loved." Lily felt uncomfortable having a stranger read her so accurately, yet there was something refreshing about being seen, truly seen after years of blending into the background of other people's dining experiences. "My parents died in an accident," she found herself explaining. "My brother was only 12. He needed me more than I needed a music degree." Chen's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was the right choice," Lily said with the conviction of someone who had repeated those words to herself countless times over the years. "The right choice can still hurt," Chen replied. From across the room, Chen's companions called for him, ready to leave. He nodded to acknowledge them but didn't move away immediately. Instead, he looked at the piano and then back at Lily. A curious expression crossed his face. Part mischief, part challenge, part something else she couldn't quite read. "Do you still play?" he asked. "Not really," Lily admitted. "No time, and we don't have space for a piano in our apartment." Chen seemed to consider this, his eyes moving from Lily to the piano and back again. His expression shifted as if he had just made a decision about something important. "What if you had the chance to play again?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Would you take it?" Before Lily could answer, Miguel appeared at her side, politely informing Chen that his party was ready to leave. With a nod, Chen rejoined his group, but not before giving Lily one last meaningful look, a look that somehow felt like both a promise and a question. As Lily watched them leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, though she couldn't possibly know what it was. All she knew was that for the first time in years, the dormant part of her that used to live and breathe music had stirred, awakened by a stranger who had somehow seen past her uniform to the person she used to be. Little did she know that Robert Chen never did anything without purpose, and that their brief conversation would set in motion events that would change the course of her life forever. The next evening, Lily arrived at Bellini's 20 minutes earlier than usual. She hadn't slept well, her mind replaying the strange encounter with Robert Chen. His question, "What if you had the chance to play again?" had followed her into her dreams, where her fingers danced across piano keys that dissolved into mist whenever she tried to press them. "You're early," noted Carla, the hostess, as Lily hung her coat in the small employee break room. "Thought I'd get a head start on setting up," Lily replied with a shrug, though in truth, she'd been drawn back to the restaurant by something she couldn't quite explain. A feeling, perhaps, or a curiosity about whether last night's encounter meant anything at all. The restaurant was quiet in these moments before opening, with only the kitchen staff bustling about and the occasional clink of silverware as waiters prepared their stations. Lily found herself drifting toward the grand piano that sat in its place of honor near the center of the dining area. In the 5 years she'd worked at Bellini's, she'd never once touched it. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, Lily gently lifted the cover, protecting the keys. The ivory and ebony looked back at her like old friends she'd abandoned long ago. She resisted the urge to press a key, knowing the sound would carry through the quiet restaurant. Instead, she simply gazed at them, remembering how it felt when music flowed from her fingertips. "You should play something," came a voice from behind her. Lily jumped, quickly lowering the cover as she turned to find Miguel watching her with an amused expression. "I was just looking," she said, embarrassed at being caught. Miguel shrugged. "Owner wouldn't mind. That thing just sits there most nights anyway." Before Lily could respond, the first customers began arriving, and the evening shift slipped into its familiar rhythm. Take orders, bring drinks, deliver food, clear plates, repeat. The routine was comforting in its predictability. Yet tonight, Lily found herself distracted, glancing toward the entrance each time the door opened. By 9 o'clock, she'd given up on the notion that Robert Chen might return. It had been a passing moment, nothing more. The kind of brief connection that happens between strangers sometimes. Meaningful in the moment, but forgotten by morning. "Lily," Miguel called from across the room. "Table for 6 just arrived. Your section." With a nod, Lily grabbed menus and made her way toward the new arrivals. She was halfway there when she stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. Sitting at the large round table was Robert Chen, once again surrounded by companions, though different ones from the previous night. As she approached the table, Chen looked up and recognition flashed across his face, followed by a small knowing smile. Lily composed herself, slipping back into her professional demeanor as she greeted the table and distributed menus. "Nice to see you again," Chen said when the others were busy discussing menu options. "You too." "Sir?" Lily replied, keeping her tone polite but neutral. "Can I start you with some drinks?" The evening proceeded much like the night before, with Lily attending to the table's needs while trying to ignore the occasional glances Chen sent her way. His companions were different tonight, more relaxed, less business-focused, and they included an older gentleman who Lily overheard was the director of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. During a lull in service, while Lily was arranging dessert menus at the service station, she felt someone approach. Looking up, she was startled to find Chen standing there. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," he said without preamble. Lily glanced around, aware that other staff members were watching with curious eyes. It wasn't often that a billionaire sought out a waitress for conversation. "Oh?" she managed, unsure how to respond. "You said you studied at Northwestern. Piano performance, right?" When Lily nodded, he continued. "My friend Peter, the older gentleman at our table, he mentioned they're looking for a pianist for their community outreach program. Paid position part-time." Lily's breath caught. "Mr. Chen, Robert," he corrected. "Robert," she said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I haven't seriously played in almost 6 years." "I couldn't possibly." He waved away her objection. "It's like riding a bike. The muscle memory stays with you." "With all due respect," Lily said, finding her voice. "Playing at a professional level isn't like riding a bike. It takes daily practice, hours of dedication. I work double shifts here most days." Chen studied her for a moment. "You miss it, though. I can see it in your eyes every time you look at that piano." The truth of his words stung. Yes, she missed it. Missed it like a phantom limb with an ache that never quite went away. But missing something and having the luxury to pursue it were different matters entirely. "My life is complicated," she said finally. "I have responsibilities." "Your brother?" Chen nodded, remembering their conversation from the previous night. "He depends on me." A thoughtful expression crossed Chen's face. "What if I told you that the position comes with a scholarship fund for family members of employees?" Lily stared at him, not quite comprehending. "Are you making this up?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "I might have suggested the idea to Peter this morning. The symphony has been looking for ways to expand their community impact." The hope that flared in Lily's chest was almost painful. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Let's just say I have a good feeling about you," Chen replied. But there is one condition, and there it was, the catch. Lily's expression must have betrayed her thought because Chen quickly added, "Nothing inappropriate, I promise." "I just want to hear you play first. Here?" Lily asked, glancing at the restaurant's piano. "No, why not? The dinner rush is over. Most of the tables are empty." He gestured around the restaurant where indeed only a handful of late diners remained. Panic rose in Lily's throat. "I told you I haven't played in years. I'd embarrass myself." "Sometimes we need to embarrass ourselves a little to move forward," Chen said simply. Then with a mischievous glint in his eye, he raised his voice slightly. "I'll make you a deal. Play anything on that piano over there. If you impress me, I'll not only talk to Peter about the position, but I'll leave you a tip that will change your life." Several heads turned at this pronouncement, including that of the restaurant manager David, who had been passing nearby. He paused, looking between Chen and Lily with raised eyebrows. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone making it clear that whatever a customer like Robert Chen wanted would be considered all right. "Perfect," Chen replied smoothly. "I was just asking Lily if she might play something for us on the piano. I understand she studied at Northwestern." David's surprised gaze turned to Lily. "You play?" Trapped now, with both men looking at her expectantly and other restaurant patrons beginning to turn their attention toward the conversation, Lily felt her cheeks flush. "I used to," she admitted reluctantly. "Well then," David said with a broad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "I'm sure we'd all enjoy a little music. If Mr. Chen is requesting it." The implied command was clear. When a patron like Robert Chen made a request, it was in everyone's best interest to accommodate it. "Just one song," Chen added, his voice gentler now. "Whatever comes to mind." Lily looked from Chen to her manager, then over to the piano that suddenly seemed both inviting and terrifying. At her tables, customers were watching with interest, and even the kitchen staff had paused to see what would happen next. "I haven't practiced," she said weakly, a last attempt at escape. "Sometimes the most beautiful music comes when we stop overthinking and just play," Chen replied. With no graceful way out, Lily took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, one song." As she made her way to the piano, her legs feeling oddly detached from her body, the restaurant fell into an expectant hush. Even the background music that usually played softly through the speakers was turned off by David, who was now standing near the bar watching with undisguised curiosity. Lily sat down on the bench, adjusting its position slightly, a habit from her student days. The keys looked back at her, patient and indifferent to her anxiety. She placed her hands on them, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips, and closed her eyes for a moment. What should she play? Her mind raced through possibilities. Something impressive and technical to show off the skills she once had? Something simple that she wouldn't mess up? In the end, she chose neither. When she opened her eyes and began to play, it was Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece that had been playing yesterday when Chen first noticed her reaction to the music. It wasn't the most technically challenging piece, but it had always moved her, and she thought perhaps her connection to it might translate into something worth hearing, even with her rusty skills. The first few notes were hesitant, her fingers stiff and uncertain. A small mistake in the opening made her wince internally. But as the familiar melody began to flow, something shifted. It was like reuniting with an old friend. Awkward at first, but quickly falling back into the rhythm of a cherished relationship. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work, standing in the doorway to listen. Lily was only dimly aware of this as she surrendered to the music, letting it wash through her. 6 years fell away, and she was back in the practice rooms at Northwestern, playing for the pure joy of it, before responsibility and hardship had reshaped her life. As the final notes of the piece floated through the air, Lily remained still, her hands hovering above the keys, caught in the moment between music and silence. Then slowly, she became aware of her surroundings again. The entire restaurant was staring at her. For 3 heartbeats, the restaurant remained frozen in silence. Lily sat motionless at the piano, her fingers still hovering above the keys, afraid to break the spell that had settled over the room. The final notes of Clair de Lune seemed to linger in the air, fading into the quiet like the last stars at dawn. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single person began to clap. The sound broke the stillness, and suddenly the entire restaurant erupted in applause. Startled, Lily turned to see not just Chen's table, but every diner, every server, even the kitchen staff with their hands still wet from dishwater, all applauding her performance. The unexpected appreciation brought a flush to her cheeks. She'd played this piece hundreds of times during her years of training, but never had it felt so meaningful, so freeing. Despite the mistakes she knew she'd made, the hesitation in the opening, the slight fumble in the middle section, there had been something genuine in the performance that seemed to have touched everyone present. David, the manager, approached with an expression Lily had never seen on his face before, a mixture of surprise and something that might have been respect. "I had no idea," he said, shaking his head slightly. "6 years you've worked here, and I never knew you could play like that." Lily managed a small smile. "I'm really out of practice." "Could have fooled me," David replied. He glanced over at Chen's table, where the billionaire was watching their interaction with interest. "I think you've impressed your audience." With that, he gave her a slight nod and stepped back, allowing Lily to make her way toward Chen's table. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked, the adrenaline from performing still coursing through her system. The older gentleman that Chen had introduced as Peter, the symphony director, was watching her with an appraising gaze. As she approached, he stood and extended his hand. "That was quite remarkable," he said as they shook hands. "Robert mentioned you'd studied at Northwestern, but not that you played with such feeling." "Thank you," Lily replied, unsure how else to respond. After years of being practically invisible to the restaurant's patrons, being the center of attention felt strange and uncomfortable. "You have a gift," Peter continued. "Technical skills can be rebuilt with practice, but the emotional connection to the music, that can't be taught." Chen, who had remained seated, was looking at her with an expression that seemed both satisfied and curious, as if she was a puzzle he was still trying to solve. "I believe I owe you something," he said, reaching for his wallet. Lily's eyes widened. "That's really not necessary. A deal is a deal," Chen interrupted smoothly. "You played. You impressed. And now?" He pulled out a check from his wallet, already filled out as if he'd prepared it in advance, confident in her abilities before she'd even touched the piano. When he handed it to her, Lily nearly dropped it in shock. Written in neat, precise handwriting was the amount, $25,000. "I can't accept this," she whispered, trying to hand it back. Chen gently pushed her hand away. "Yes, you can. And you will." Peter cleared his throat. "Robert and I were discussing the community outreach program I mentioned. We have a position opening next month. It's part-time, working with children from underserved neighborhoods, introducing them to classical music. The pay isn't anything like that check," he added with a nod toward the paper still clutched in Lily's hand. "But it's steady, and there's room to grow." Lily's mind was spinning. Part of her wanted to pinch herself, certain she must be dreaming. Things like this didn't happen in real life, not to people like her, who'd had to set aside their dreams for more practical concerns. "I don't understand," she said finally, looking between the two men. "Why me? There must be dozens of pianists in Chicago more qualified, more practiced." "Perhaps," Peter acknowledged. "But there's something about the way you play. Even with the small technical errors, which, by the way, would disappear within weeks of regular practice, there was an authenticity to your performance that many trained musicians spend years trying to achieve." Chen nodded in agreement. "When music becomes a profession, sometimes the joy gets lost in the pursuit of perfection. You haven't lost that joy. I could see it in your face as you played." A lump formed in Lily's throat. They were right. Despite everything life had thrown at her, despite having to walk away from her music studies, she had never stopped loving the piano. She'd just buried that love deep, trying not to think about what she'd given up. "I have responsibilities," she said, voicing the reality that had shaped her decisions for years now. "My brother." "The scholarship fund I mentioned is real," Chen interjected. "Peter and I discussed it this morning. The symphony has been wanting to expand their educational programs. Your brother would qualify for tutoring, summer programs, even college preparation courses. It was too much to take in." Lily looked down at the check in her hand, then back up at the two men who were casually offering to reshape her life in ways she hadn't dared to imagine for years. "Like, I need some time to think," she managed to say. Peter nodded, understandingly, and handed her a business card. Of course. Call me when you're ready to discuss details. No pressure, but I do hope you'll consider it. As if on cue, Chen's phone buzzed. He checked it quickly, then stood. We should be going. Early meeting tomorrow. He turned to Lily. The check isn't conditional on you taking the position, by the way. That's yours regardless. Consider it an investment in your talent. Before she could respond, Chen and his party were gathering their things and preparing to leave. Peter shook her hand once more, his grip firm and encouraging. Music finds a way back to those who truly love it, he said quietly. It's been waiting for you. Then they were gone, leaving Lily standing by the table, a check worth more money than she'd ever held at one time in her hand, and a card that represented a second chance at the dream she'd thought was lost forever. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Word of her performance had spread throughout the restaurant, and customers who'd arrived after kept asking David if the piano waitress would play again. He'd looked at her questioningly, but Lily had shaken her head. Once was enough for tonight. She needed to process everything that had happened. When her shift finally ended just after midnight, Lily declined Miguel's offer to share a cab, preferring to walk the 15 blocks to her apartment despite the late hour. The cool night air helped clear her head as she tried to make sense of the evening's events. The check felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. $25,000. It would pay off the remaining medical bills from her brother's accident 2 years ago. It would fix the perpetually broken heating in their apartment. It might even be enough for a down payment on a small place of their own, rather than continuing to rent. And the job offer? That was something else entirely. It wasn't just about money. It was about reconnecting with the part of herself she'd buried for so long. By the time she reached her building, a worn brick walk-up on the city's west side, Lily had made up her mind about one thing. Before making any decisions, she needed to talk to the one person whose life would be most affected by any change in hers. The apartment was dark and quiet when she entered, careful not to make noise that might wake her brother. Tom was 16 now, no longer the frightened 12-year-old who'd clung to her after their parents' funeral. But he still needed her in ways that went beyond the practical matters of food and shelter. To her surprise, she found him awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with a textbook open in front of him and earbuds in. "Hey," she said, tapping his shoulder gently. Tom looked up, pulling out one earbud. "You're late," he observed, though without accusation. "Something happened at work tonight," Lily replied, pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. "Something big." Tom closed his book, giving her his full attention. At 16, he already had the serious, thoughtful demeanor of someone much older, a consequence perhaps of growing up too fast after their parents' deaths. "Good something or bad something?" he asked cautiously. In response, Lily pulled out the check and placed it on the table between them. Tom's eyes widened as he read the amount. "Is this real? Did you win the lottery or something?" "Or something," Lily said, and began to tell him about Robert Chen, the piano, and the offer from the symphony director. As she spoke, she watched her brother's expression change from surprise to understanding, to something that looked a lot like pride. "You played in front of everyone?" he asked when she'd finished. "After all this time?" Lily nodded. "It was terrifying and wonderful." Tom was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he asked the question she'd been asking herself all the way home. "Are you going to take the job?" "I don't know," she admitted. "It would mean changes. My schedule at the restaurant would have to shift. I'd need time to practice, to rebuild my skills. We'd have to figure out—" "You should do it," Tom interrupted. Lily blinked, surprised by his certainty. "It's not that simple, Tom. We have to think about—" "You gave up everything for me," he said quietly. "Your degree, your music, all of it. You never complained, not once. But I've seen the way you look sometimes when there's music playing, like you're somewhere else." Tears pricked at the corners of Lily's eyes. She hadn't realized he'd noticed. "That was my choice," she said firmly. "And I'd make it again in a heartbeat." "You're my brother, and you're my sister," Tom replied. "Which is why I'm telling you to take the job. Mom and Dad would want you to." The mention of their parents brought a fresh wave of emotion. What would they think of the strange turn her life had taken tonight? "We'll talk more tomorrow," Lily said, too overwhelmed to continue the conversation. "You should get some sleep." "It's late." Tom nodded and gathered his books but paused before heading to his room. Lily, I'm really proud of you. For playing again, for not giving up, even when it seemed like you had to. After Tom had gone to bed, Lily sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the check and the business card side by side. For the first time in 6 years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where music was part of her life again, where the sacrifice she'd made for her brother didn't have to be permanent. She thought about the feeling that had washed over her as she played tonight, how right it had felt to reconnect with that part of herself, and she thought about Chen's words. Music finds a way back to those who truly love it. Maybe, just maybe, it had found its way back to her. The next morning, Lily woke before her alarm, her mind still buzzing with thoughts of the previous night. For a moment she wondered if it had all been a dream, the piano, the applause, the check, the job offer. But when she reached for her wallet on the nightstand, there it was, a check for $25,000 signed by Robert Chen, alongside Peter's business card from the Chicago Symphony. She got up quietly, careful not to wake Tom, and made coffee in the small kitchen. Their apartment wasn't much. 2 tiny bedrooms, a bathroom with temperamental plumbing, and a combined kitchen living area that was smaller than some people's walk-in closets. But it was theirs, or at least the space they'd called home for the past 6 years. As she sipped her coffee, Lily's gaze drifted to the corner of the living room, where their few family photographs sat on a small shelf. Her parents smiled back at her from their wedding photo, young and hopeful with no idea of the tragedy that would cut their lives short. Beside it was a picture of Lily at her high school graduation, seated at a piano, her face alight with joy as her fingers pressed the keys. She'd been so certain then of the path ahead. Music school, performance degree, perhaps teaching on the side while auditioning for orchestras or pursuing solo work. Her professors had told her she had real potential, not just technical skill, but that rare ability to make listeners feel something when she played. Then came the accident. Her parents' car, a drunk driver, a rainy night, and suddenly at 22, Lily had become responsible for a 12-year-old boy who had just lost everything. There had been no question in her mind about what she needed to do. School went on hold. The hours spent practicing were replaced by hours waiting tables, filing insurance paperwork, meeting with Tom's teachers and counselors. The grand piano her parents had sacrificed to buy her stayed with a friend who had space for it, promised to be kept safe until Lily could reclaim it, a day that seemed less and less likely to ever come. Now, staring at the check in her hand, Lily felt a tangle of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. Hope, fear, excitement, guilt. The sound of Tom's bedroom door opening broke her reverie. He shuffled into the kitchen, hair rumpled from sleep, looking more like the young boy he'd been when their parents died than the teenager he now was. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "There's cereal," Lily said, gesturing to the cabinet. "Or I could make eggs." Tom shook his head. "Cereal's fine." He poured himself a bowl, then sat across from her at their small table. After a few bites, he nodded toward her hand. "So you decided yet?" Lily realized she was still holding Chen's check. She set it down on the table between them. "I'm thinking about it." "What's there to think about?" Tom asked around a mouthful of cereal. "It's a no-brainer, Lil. The money alone would change everything." "And the job? Getting to play again?" He shook his head. "You'd be crazy not to take it." "It's not that simple," Lily sighed. "My schedule at the restaurant, David would work around it," Tom interrupted. "He'd be an idiot not to after what happened last night. Bet you'll be bringing in all kinds of customers hoping to hear the piano waitress play." Lily couldn't help but smile at that. "Maybe, but there's also your schedule to consider. If I'm working at the restaurant some days and at the symphony program others, plus finding time to practice, I'm 16, not 6, Tom reminded her. "I can look after myself for a few hours." "And school?" "Your grades have been slipping, Tom." At this, her brother had the grace to look slightly abashed. "That's not because you're not around enough. That's because algebra makes no sense, which is exactly why you need support." "Didn't the symphony guy say something about educational programs?" Tom asked. "Maybe they could help with the algebra thing." Lily felt a flutter of hope. Peter had indeed mentioned educational support as part of the scholarship program Chen had set up. "Maybe," she conceded. "So call him," Tom urged, pushing the business card toward her. "What's the worst that could happen?" What indeed? Lily wondered. That the job wouldn't work out? That she'd discover 6 years away from serious piano study had eroded her abilities too much? That she'd get her hopes up only to have them dashed again? But there was another possibility, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. That she might actually succeed. That music might once again become more than just a painful memory of what could have been. Okay, she said finally. I'll call. 3 days later, Lily found herself walking through the imposing glass doors of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra Administration Building. Her hands were clammy, and she wished she'd worn something nicer than her best pair of jeans and a simple blouse. But Peter had assured her over the phone that the meeting was casual, just a chance to discuss the position and see the facility where the community program operated. The receptionist directed her to a conference room on the 3rd floor, where she found Peter waiting alongside 2 other people. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, introduced as Diane, the education director, and a younger man named Ben, who coordinated the community outreach programs. We're so pleased you're considering joining us, Diane said warmly after introductions were made. Peter hasn't stopped talking about your playing since he heard you at the restaurant. Lily felt her cheeks warm. It was far from my best performance, which makes it all the more impressive, Peter said. If that's what you sound like out of practice, I can only imagine what we'll hear once you've had time to rebuild your skills. The meeting that followed was unlike any job interview Lily had ever experienced. Rather than focusing on her qualifications or lack thereof, given the 6-year gap in her musical career, the conversation centered around the program itself, working with children from neighborhoods across Chicago, introducing them to classical music through interactive workshops and beginner lessons. Many of these kids have never seen a piano up close, let alone had the chance to play one, Ben explained. We're not trying to create prodigies here. We're just opening doors, showing them possibilities they might not otherwise see. Something about his words resonated with Lily. Wasn't that what Chen and Peter were doing for her? Opening a door she thought had closed forever? The position is 15 hours a week to start, Diane continued, with potential to increase as the program expands. And as Peter may have mentioned, there's a scholarship component for family members of our staff. Your brother would qualify for our tutoring program, summer workshops, and eventually college prep assistance. Lily tried to keep her expression neutral, but her heart was racing. It sounded perfect, almost too perfect. And the piano requirements. I should be honest, I'm very rusty. I haven't had regular access to a piano in years. Peter smiled. That's easily remedied. We have practice rooms you can use, and part of your hours would actually include personal practice time. We want our instructors to continue developing their own skills. By the end of the meeting, Lily's head was spinning with information, possibilities, and an unfamiliar feeling that took her a moment to identify. Hope. Real, substantial hope, not the vague, wishful thinking she'd occasionally allowed herself over the years. Do you have any questions for us? Diane asked as the meeting wound down. Lily hesitated, then decided to voice the concern that had been nagging at her. I'm just wondering, why me? I mean, there must be dozens of pianists in Chicago with better credentials, more recent experience. Perhaps, Peter acknowledged. But there's something special about your playing, Lily. Something that can't be taught or learned from textbooks. Besides, he added with a smile, we have Robert Chen to thank for finding you. And he has an uncanny knack for spotting genuine talent. Speaking of Robert, Ben interjected, checking his watch. Isn't he supposed to be joining us? As if on cue, there was a knock on the conference room door and Robert Chen walked in. He was dressed more casually than Lily had seen him at the restaurant, in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, but he still carried himself with the same quiet confidence. Sorry I'm late, he said, taking an empty seat at the table. Traffic was a nightmare. He smiled at Lily. How's it going? Overwhelming? A bit, she admitted. We were just wrapping up, Diane said. Lily, we'd like to offer you the position starting next month. Take some time to think about it, of course, but we hope you'll consider joining our team. As the meeting concluded and they all stood to leave, Chen held back, gesturing for Lily to wait. When the others had left, he turned to her with a serious expression. So, what do you think? Lily took a deep breath. It sounds amazing. Almost too amazing if I'm being honest. Chen nodded understandingly. You're waiting for the catch. Isn't there always one? Not this time, he said simply. Sometimes, Lily, good things happen simply because they should. Because talent deserves recognition and passion deserves opportunity. Why did you do all this? She asked. The question that had been burning in her mind since that first night at the restaurant. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Chen was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Let me show you something, he said finally, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through it briefly, then handed it to her. On the screen was a photograph of a young boy, perhaps 12 or 13, seated at a piano much too large for him, his face a picture of determination as his small fingers stretched to reach the keys. That's me, Chen said. I grew up in a tiny apartment in New York. My mother cleaned offices at night and took care of other people's children during the day. We had nothing, except for that piano which she bought secondhand with money she'd saved for years. Lily looked at the photo with new understanding. You played? Chen nodded. Every day. I loved it more than anything. My teacher said I had real potential, that I could get a scholarship if I kept at it. What happened? A sad smile crossed Chen's face. Life happened. My mother got sick. Bills piled up. The piano was sold to pay for her treatment. By the time things stabilized, years had passed. I'd found other interests, other paths. Your tech company, Lily guessed. Eventually, yes, and I've been fortunate beyond what I ever imagined possible. He took back the phone, looking at the photo one more time before putting it away. But there are days when I wonder what might have been if someone had stepped in then, made it possible for me to keep playing while still taking care of what mattered. Lily felt her throat tighten with emotion. So this is what? Paying it forward? Something like that, Chen agreed. Or maybe just making sure that another piano player doesn't have to choose between responsibility and passion. Maybe both can be possible. As Lily left the symphony building a few minutes later, stepping out into the bright Chicago afternoon, she felt lighter than she had in years. The path ahead wasn't certain. There would be challenges, adjustments, new routines to establish. But for the first time in a very long time, she was moving towards something rather than just surviving. She pulled out her phone and dialed Tom's number. So? He answered immediately. Are you going to do it? Lily smiled, watching the city bustle around her. Yeah, she said. I think I am. 6 months later, Lily stood backstage at the Chicago Symphony Center trying to calm her racing heart. Through the heavy curtain, she could hear the murmur of the audience gathering in the hall. Hundreds of people who had come to witness the culmination of the community music program's spring season. Nervous? Asked a voice behind her. Lily turned to find Ben, the program coordinator, offering her a bottle of water. Terrified, she admitted, accepting the water gratefully. I haven't performed for an audience this size since, well, ever. You'll be amazing, Ben assured her. I've heard you practice. Besides, those kids adore you. They'll be cheering no matter what. Lily smiled at the thought of her students. Over the past 6 months, she had worked with 27 children from across Chicago, ranging in age from 8 to 16. Some had never touched a piano before joining the program. Others had shown such natural aptitude that they'd progressed to complex pieces in a matter of months. Tonight, 5 of them would be performing alongside Lily and other instructors in a showcase designed to highlight the program's success. 5 minutes, called the stage manager, passing by with a clipboard. Lily took a deep breath and smoothed down the simple black dress she'd bought for the occasion, her first new formal wear in years. So much had changed in the months since that night at the restaurant when Robert Chen had challenged her to play. She still worked at Bellini's, but only 3 nights a week now. David had been surprisingly accommodating once he realized that having a pianist on staff was good for business. On quiet evenings, he'd sometimes ask her to play a piece or two, and the restaurant had developed a reputation as a place where diners might be treated to unexpected music. The rest of her week was divided between teaching in the community program and redeveloping her own skills. True to Peter's promise, she'd been given access to practice rooms and even occasional coaching from symphony musicians who volunteered with the program. The rust had begun to fall away from her playing, revealing the foundation of technique still solid beneath. And Tom, her brother's transformation, had perhaps been the most remarkable of all. The educational support provided through Chen's scholarship fund had connected him with tutors who finally helped math make sense to him. His grades had improved dramatically, and he'd recently been talking about college possibilities, something that had seemed like a distant fantasy just months ago. Places, everyone. The stage manager called, interrupting Lily's thoughts. The performance was structured to begin with the instructors playing a piece together, followed by student performances and concluding with a finale featuring both students and teachers. As Lily took her place at one of the two grand pianos on stage, she caught sight of Tom in the third row giving her a thumbs up. Beside him sat Robert Chen, who had become something of a mentor to them both, dropping by occasionally to check on their progress or offering advice about everything from piano technique to college applications. The stage lights were bright, making it difficult to see much of the audience, but Lily knew that many of her students' families were out there, people who had rearranged work schedules, arranged for childcare, or traveled across the city to witness their children's achievements. The thought filled her with a sense of purpose stronger than any performance anxiety. The conductor gave a nod, and the music began, a special arrangement of Debussy's Clair de Lune that had been adapted for the ensemble of piano, strings, and woodwinds. The piece had become something of a signature for Lily, a reminder of where this new journey had begun. As her fingers found the familiar keys, Lily felt that same sense of homecoming she'd experienced that night at Bellini's, but stronger now, more confident. The months of practice had restored her technical skills, but they had given her something else too, a deeper appreciation for the gift of music itself. Teaching had changed her perspective, showing her that music wasn't just about personal achievement or performance. It was about connection, about opening doors for others the way Chen had opened one for her. The first half of the program passed in what felt like moments. Lily's students performed beautifully, even the youngest managing to play through her piece without the mistakes that had plagued recent rehearsals. The pride Lily felt watching them bow to enthusiastic applause was unlike anything she'd experienced before. Then came the finale, a piece that had been arranged specifically for the program, allowing students of different skill levels to participate alongside their instructors. As the last notes faded, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Backstage, after the performance, the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Students hugged their teachers, parents expressed tearful gratitude, and even Peter, who had attended countless world-class performances, seemed genuinely moved by what he'd witnessed. "You've done remarkable work," he told Lily as the crowd began to disperse. "All of you have. It's the kids," Lily said. "They're incredible. Yes, but they needed someone to show them what was possible." Peter smiled. "Which reminds me, we should talk about next year. I'd like to expand your role in the program. More hours, more responsibility, if you're interested, of course." Before Lily could respond, Tom appeared at her side, his face alight with excitement. "That was awesome," he exclaimed. "Everyone was blown away." "You think so?" Lily asked, still riding the high of the performance. "Absolutely," came Chen's voice as he joined their small circle. "In fact, I wasn't the only one impressed." He gestured toward a small group of people in formal attire who were speaking with Diane near the exit. The couple on the left, they're major donors to arts programs across the Midwest. They were asking about you specifically. Lily felt a flutter of nervousness. What did they want to know? If you'd consider performing at a fundraiser they're hosting next month. Chen's expression was carefully neutral, but Lily could detect a hint of pride in his voice. It would be paid, of course. Quite well, actually. The implication was clear. This could be the beginning of performance opportunities beyond teaching. 6 months ago, Lily wouldn't have believed it possible. Now it felt like just another step on a path that was continuing to unfold before her. "I'd need to think about it," she said, not because she wasn't interested, but because she'd learned to be thoughtful about new opportunities, to consider how they fit into the life she was building, not just for herself but for Tom as well. Chen nodded approvingly. "Of course. No rush." As the conversation shifted to plans for a celebration dinner, Lily found herself momentarily stepping back, watching the animated discussion between Tom, Chen, and Peter. From a distance, they might have looked like family, the teenager gesturing enthusiastically as he recounted his favorite moments from the performance, the older men listening with genuine interest and occasional laughter. In a way, Lily realized, that's what they had become, an unconventional family formed not by blood, but by a shared love of music and the strange twist of fate that had brought them all together that night at Bellini's. Later that evening, after the celebration dinner had concluded and Lily and Tom were walking home, her brother asked the question that had been on both their minds. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Chen hadn't come to the restaurant that night? If he hadn't heard you talking about music? Lily considered this. Sometimes. But I think life has a way of circling back to the things that matter most. Maybe not in the way we expect and maybe not on our timeline, but eventually. Like your piano playing, Tom nodded. It found its way back to you. Exactly. Lily smiled, thinking of the journey of the past 6 months. From waitress reluctantly approaching a piano to instructor and performer receiving a standing ovation. And not just the playing, the joy of it. The purpose. They walked in comfortable silence for a block before Tom spoke again. Remember that check he gave you? The first night? Of course. You never told me what you did with it, Lily smiled. Most of it went into savings for your college fund. Some paid off old medical bills, and some... She hesitated, then decided there was no reason to keep it a secret anymore. Some of it is being used to restore an old piano. Tom stopped walking. You bought a piano? Where are you keeping it? Our apartment is tiny. Not for our apartment, Lily explained. For the community center near us. They have that big room that's barely used, and so many kids in our neighborhood can't make it all the way to the symphony center for lessons. Understanding dawned on Tom's face. You're starting your own program, Lily nodded. Just small to begin with. Weekend lessons. Chen's helping with the details. Paying it forward, Tom said thoughtfully. Like he did for you. That's the idea. As they resumed walking, Lily found herself thinking about the unlikely sequence of events that had led to this moment. A busy night at a restaurant, a curious billionaire, a moment of courage at a piano she'd been afraid to touch. Any link in that chain could have broken, sending her life in a completely different direction. But it hadn't broken, and now here she was, not just reclaiming her own passion but helping others discover theirs. The thought filled her with a quiet contentment that went beyond the excitement of the evening's performance. 6 months ago, she'd been a waitress with a buried dream, convinced that her chance at a musical life had passed her by. Tonight she was a pianist, a teacher, a performer, living proof that sometimes second chances come in the most unexpected ways. And as they reached their apartment building, Lily found herself looking forward to tomorrow for the first time in years, not just accepting what the day might bring, but eager to discover it, to shape it, to fill it with music. The piano had found its way back to her just as Chen had said it would. And she wasn't about to let it go again.